When humans went silent, galaxies started to fear, and for good reason. As the harvesters adapt to the SHIELD network, Dr. Alara Sun makes a brilliant, desperate gambit, reversing the quantum nodes to create a feedback loop that amplifies the enemy's own energy signatures against them. This single decision transforms certain defeat into stunning victory, proving silence can be deadlier than words. The curved, opalescent walls of the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council shimmered with the reflected light of 1,000 stars, visible through the transparent dome ceiling. Located on Avoris Prime, the engineered paradise at the heart of the Milky Way's diplomatic sector. The hall had been designed to inspire awe in even the most jaded of interstellar representatives. Dr. Alara Sun stood at its periphery, her slender fingers tracing the holographic interface of her archive terminal, momentarily lost in the dance of ancient data streams. As the Council's senior xenohistorian, Alara spent most of her days immersed in the past rather than the present. Her position was prestigious, but often overlooked in the grand political theater that played out before her. She preferred it that way. The quiet corners of history suited her temperament far better than the bombastic declarations that typically filled this chamber. The hall began to fill with the day's session attendees, the floating orbs of the Medusan delegation, the chitinous, gleaming forms of the Zorlax, the crystalline structures housing the consciousness of the Lithians. Each species had its own manner of communication, its own cultural nuances, yet all had adapted to the shared protocols of galactic diplomacy over the millennia of cooperation. And then there were the humans. If there was one thing every species in the Galactic Council knew about humans, it was that they never stopped talking. Since their acceptance into the Council in 4127 AG, humans had filled the archives with speeches, declarations, position papers, and endless streams of communications. Broadcast diplomacy, they called it, a constant flow of words designed to ensure their relatively young species maintained visibility among the ancient civilizations that dominated galactic politics. Commander Jean Voss was the current embodiment of this human trait. As the delegation's envoy, his booming voice and expansive gestures had become legendary in council sessions. Where other species might make a point with a single, carefully crafted statement, Voss would deliver an impassioned discourse, complete with historical references, emotional appeals, and the occasional Earth-based idiom that defied translation. Alara, an anomaly among her kind, had always found this characteristic of her species slightly embarrassing. Her work in the archives required patience, precision, and above all, the ability to listen, qualities that sometimes seemed in short supply among her more vocal compatriots. Still hiding among your historical records, Dr. Sun? The voice, clicking and melodious at once, belonged to Ambassador Roll of the Zorlak Confederation. The insectoid diplomat's compound eyes refracted the starlight as he approached Alara's station. Not hiding, Ambassador. Searching. Alara smiled, closing the file she'd been examining. History has a way of repeating itself. I find it useful to listen to its echoes. Ah, if only more of your species shared your appreciation for listening. Roll's mandibles clicked in what Alara had learned to recognize as amusement. Today's session promises to be particularly verbose. Commander Voss has requested an extended slot to discuss the expansion of the Neptune Mining Accord. Alara nodded politely, though inwardly she sighed. The Neptune Accords had been debated for months already, with humans leading the charge for increased resource rights in their home system. It was typical of their approach, persistent to the point of exhaustion. I'll be sure to archive his remarks with appropriate cross-references, she said diplomatically. Your patience is commendable. Roll's antennae twitched slightly, a sign of skepticism among the Zorlax. Though I sometimes wonder if it is entirely natural. You are unlike most humans I have encountered in my 3 centuries of diplomatic service. Before Alara could respond, the chamber's ambient lighting shifted to the deep blue that signaled the imminent start of proceedings. Delegates moved toward their designated positions, a choreographed dance of protocol and precedents established over thousands of years. Alara returned to her terminal, but her attention was caught by a peculiar notification blinking at the edge of her display. A recently decoded fragment of Martian script, part of the ongoing project to translate the artifacts discovered in the ruins beneath Olympus Mons. Most of the Mars civilization's records had been destroyed when their world's core destabilized millennia before humans evolved on neighboring Earth. But the fragments that survived offered tantalizing glimpses of a sophisticated culture. This particular fragment contained a term she had seen with increasing frequency: the Harvesters. The translation algorithm struggled with the contextual nuances, but the glyph itself evoked something ominous: a star going dark, surrounded by symbols that the system interpreted as warnings. Alara flagged the fragment for further analysis later. The session was beginning, and despite her reservations about the verbose nature of human diplomacy, professional duty required her attention. The council chair, a Telosian elder, whose name translated roughly as contemplation through stillness, activated the central podium. Their voice, modulated to accommodate the hearing ranges of all present species, filled the chamber. We convene in the spirit of mutual understanding and collaborative governance. The 4,982nd year of galactic unity brings both challenges and opportunities to our shared civilization. Let us begin with the scheduled address from the Human Federation regarding the Neptune Resource Accords. Commander Voss, you have the floor. Silence. In a chamber accustomed to the immediate and often overlapping voices of eager delegates, the absence of sound was startling. Alara looked up from her terminal, scanning the human delegation section. The seats allocated to Earth, Mars, and the Jovian colonies were conspicuously empty. The council chair's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate confusion. I repeat, Commander Voss of the Human Federation has the floor. Again, nothing but silence greeted the announcement. Murmurs began to ripple through the assembly. Humans were many things, occasionally reckless, often ambitious, sometimes naive in their relatively brief time on the galactic stage, but they were never, ever late for an opportunity to speak. Alara quickly accessed the communication logs. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the data. The standard diplomatic channels showed no human transmissions for the past 6 hours, an unprecedented gap. Usually, human channels were saturated with everything from formal diplomatic communiques to cultural broadcasts and commercial signals. Now there was nothing. As if sensing her discovery, Ambassador Roll appeared beside her terminal once more. Is something amiss with your delegation, Dr. Sun? I'm not certain, Alara admitted, continuing to scan the logs. There's been a complete cessation of human communications across all standard channels. The Zorlak's antennae stiffened, a sign of alarm. All channels? That is unprecedented. The chair was now addressing the full council. We will proceed to the next agenda item while we attempt to establish contact with the Human Federation. The Andromedan Trade Delegation may... Honored Chair! Alara surprised herself by activating her speaking signal. In her 5 years of service to the archives, she had never once addressed the full council. All eyes in the chamber, compound, crystalline, gelatinous, and otherwise, turned toward her. Dr. Alara Sun of the Historical Archives, the chair acknowledged, their tone indicating mild surprise. Alara swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the weight of attention. I believe this silence warrants immediate investigation. The human communication network has gone completely dark, not just diplomatic channels, but all broadcast signals from Earth to the outer colonies. The chair's bioluminescence pulsed in a pattern indicating thoughtful concern. Perhaps a technical malfunction in their network. Unlikely, Alara replied, gaining confidence as she focused on the data rather than the audience. Human communication systems are redundant by design, a cultural adaptation to previous isolation. For all channels to fail simultaneously would require... She hesitated, reluctant to voice her suspicion without more evidence. Would require what, Dr. Sun? Prompted the chair. Deliberate action, she finished. The human silence is intentional. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, clicks, telepathic bursts, and pheromone releases, each species expressing alarm in their native manner. Humans had been the galaxy's most consistent communicators for centuries. Their sudden silence was not merely unusual, it was deeply unsettling. "Order!" called the chair, their voice modulation increasing to override the commotion. "We will dispatch investigative teams immediately. Dr. Sun, as both a human representative and a historical specialist, your insight may be valuable. Please coordinate with Security Council members to establish contact with your species' leadership." Alara nodded, already formulating a methodical approach to the mystery. Yet, as she turned back to her terminal, a new notification appeared. This one from an automated monitoring system at the Jupiter orbital stations. 3 Proximan scout ships, approaching on a standard diplomatic trajectory, had been destroyed without warning upon crossing the designated perimeter. No communication, no explanation, just silence followed by destruction. The galaxy's most talkative species had gone quiet, and in that silence, something terrible was taking shape. Alara's hand trembled slightly as she forwarded the Jupiter report to the Security Council queue. The fragment of Martian script, the darkened star glyph labeled Harvesters, flashed again in her mind. She had a sinking feeling that the ancient warning and today's silence were connected by threads she had yet to unravel. "What are you doing, humans?" she whispered to herself, staring at the empty seats of her species delegation. "What are you afraid of?" The next 48 hours transformed the Grand Hall from a chamber of deliberation to a crisis center. Delegates who normally spent hours debating the nuances of trade agreements now huddled around tactical displays, watching with growing alarm as the pattern of human silence spread across the Orion arm of the galaxy. Trade vessels from Earth and its colonies continued to arrive at ports throughout Council space, but their crews remained aboard, their communication systems dormant. Orbital stations around human-controlled worlds went dark one by one, their automated navigation beacons still functioning, but all personnel channels silent. Most disturbing were the reports of military movements. Long-range scanners detected increased activity around the human defense platforms in the Tau Ceti and Epsilon Eridani systems. Fleet configurations were changing, ships moving into positions that strategic analysts described as defensive posture with offensive capability. Yet still, not a single word came from any human source. Alara had barely slept, dividing her time between the Xenohistory archives and the emergency briefings. She had compiled everything she could find about previous instances of communication blackouts among Council species. But none matched the scale or apparent coordination of the human silence. "They are preparing for war," Ambassador Roll declared during the 3rd emergency session. The Zorlak diplomats' usually measured tones had given way to the sharp clicks of agitation. "The evidence is clear. The humans have chosen to abandon diplomacy in favor of military action." "Against whom?" countered the Medusan representative, their translation field vibrating with skepticism. "No provocations have been reported. No territorial disputes have escalated beyond normal parameters." "Perhaps they plan to expand beyond their allotted systems," suggested a Vegan delegate. "Humans have always pushed against the resource limitations imposed by the Council." Alara listened to the speculation with growing frustration. These were the galaxy's most experienced diplomats. Yet, they were constructing narratives based on fear rather than evidence. "Honored representatives," she finally interjected. "I believe we are approaching this situation from the wrong perspective." The chair acknowledged her with a gesture. "Explain, Dr. Sun." "We are assuming that human silence is directed at us, a rejection of council communication protocols, or a prelude to aggression against member species." Alara activated her terminal's projection function, displaying a map of known space with human territories highlighted. But look at the pattern of military positioning. Their fleets are not oriented toward any council worlds. They're creating a perimeter around their own systems, facing outward toward the galactic rim. She enhanced the display, showing the vector analysis of human ship movements. They're not preparing to attack. They're preparing to defend. "Against what threat?" Ambassador Roll demanded. "No hostilities have been reported from beyond council space." "Not currently," Alara agreed. "But I've been analyzing historical records, particularly translations from the Mars ruins." She switched the display to show the Martian glyphs she'd been studying. There are repeated references to an entity or species called the Harvesters. The contextual markers suggest an existential threat that may have contributed to the Mars civilization's downfall. The chair's bioluminescence dimmed slightly, a sign of deep concern. "You believe humans have discovered evidence of this ancient threat's return?" "It's a possibility we should not dismiss," Alara said carefully. "The Mars ruins are primarily located on human-controlled territory. They may have decoded warning systems or predictive models that we haven't been privy to." "Convenient speculation." Roll clicked dismissively. "More likely, this is a human power play, creating crisis to force concessions on the Neptune Accords or other disputed matters." Alara felt a flash of anger at the ambassador's dismissal. But before she could respond, the chamber's security protocols activated. The entrance portal shimmered, and a figure stepped through, a human. Not Commander Voss or any of the regular delegation members, but a tall, spare man with silver-streaked dark hair and the insignia of the Earth Science Directorate on his uniform collar. "Dr. Lucian Mora," he introduced himself, voice steady despite the hundreds of alien eyes fixed upon him. "Physicist, Jupiter Research Station. I come without official sanction from my government." The chamber erupted once more in overlapping voices and translation fields. A human, appearing without authorization during a diplomatic crisis, was unprecedented. "Silence," commanded the chair, their voice modulation at maximum. When order was restored, they addressed the newcomer directly. "Your presence here violates multiple protocols. Dr. Mora, explain yourself immediately." "I apologize for the breach of procedure," Mora said, scanning the room until his eyes found Alara. "But time is critical. I've come because of Dr. Sun's historical research." Alara felt her pulse quicken. "You know about the Martian translations?" Mora nodded grimly. "More than that. I've confirmed them." He turned to address the full council. "The Harvesters are real, and they're coming. That's why we've gone silent." The physicist's words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Alara moved closer, protocol forgotten in the moment's urgency. "You've seen them?" she asked. "Not directly, but we've detected their signature." Mora produced a small data crystal and handed it to the nearest security officer. "These are coordinates for a network of quantum-linked sensors we established beyond the heliopause 5 years ago. They've been recording anomalous gravity waves consistent with massive objects traveling at near-relativistic speeds." The security officer transferred the crystal's contents to the central system. A new display appeared above the council floor, a three-dimensional map showing dozens of points of light converging on the Milky Way from the direction of intergalactic space. "The pattern matches exactly with the Martian warning glyphs," Mora continued. "A harvesting swarm, approaching in formation. Based on their velocity and trajectory, they'll reach the Orion Arm within 16 days. Ambassador Roll's compound eyes reflected the display's light as he studied the approaching points. If this threat is real, why would humans choose silence? Why not alert the Council immediately? Because they communicate through quantum resonance, Mora explained. Every transmission we send, every broadcast signal, every communication beam, they can detect and track them across vast distances. It's how they hunt. The Mars civilization learned this too late. Their warning beacons actually accelerated their doom by pinpointing their location. Alara's mind raced, connecting historical fragments she'd cataloged over years of research. The silent stars in the Martian texts, she murmured. They weren't stars that went dark naturally. They were civilizations that went silent in a desperate attempt to hide. Precisely, Mora nodded. When our deep space arrays first detected the approaching swarm 6 days ago, our leadership made an immediate decision. Total communication blackout across all human systems. No signals of any kind that could be traced back to our worlds. The chair's bioluminescence pulsed in a complex pattern that Alara recognized as indicating deep deliberation. If what you say is true, Dr. Mora, then your presence here has potentially compromised not only human worlds, but all Council species. By traveling to Avarice Prime, you may have led these harvesters directly to the heart of our civilization. Mora's expression remained resolute. A calculated risk. The harvesters are following the historical paths of high-signal activity. They'll find all our worlds eventually. Our only hope is to prepare a coordinated defense, something the Mars civilization never had the chance to organize. Alara studied the tactical display, a terrible realization dawning. That's why human fleets are repositioning. You're preparing an ambush along their projected approach vector. Yes, Mora confirmed. But human forces alone won't be sufficient. We need the combined defensive capabilities of all Council species. Ambassador Roll's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of intense calculation. This Council has maintained peace for nearly 5,000 years through dialogue and diplomacy. What you propose is unprecedented. So is the threat, Alara said quietly, finding herself in the unexpected position of supporting a military response. If Dr. Mora's data is accurate, we're facing an enemy that specifically targets communicative civilizations. Our greatest strength, our ability to connect across species and systems, has become our greatest vulnerability. The chair's voice resonated through the chamber, pitched to convey maximum gravity. We must verify this information immediately. I am invoking Emergency Protocol 7. A probe will be dispatched to the coordinates provided by Dr. Mora. With respect, Honored Chair, Mora interjected. A standard probe uses active scanning systems that would be detected immediately. We will modify the probe to use only passive sensors, the chair responded. Security Council representatives, prepare the necessary adjustments. Dr. Sun, Dr. Mora, you will provide all relevant historical and scientific data to the mission specialists. They paused, their bioluminescence dimming to a solemn glow. This session is now classified under the highest secrecy protocols. No communications regarding these discussions will leave this chamber until we have confirmation. As the delegates dispersed to their emergency assignments, Alara found herself walking alongside Dr. Mora toward the technical briefing rooms. You took an enormous risk coming here, she said quietly. Someone had to, he replied, his voice equally low. Our leadership chose isolation as our first defense, but some of us recognize the flaw in that approach. The harvesters have been methodically eliminating communicative species for millennia. Hiding might buy time, but not salvation. The Mars civilization tried to warn us, Alara mused. All these years, we thought their records were describing a natural disaster or internal conflict. But they were documenting an invasion. An invasion they detected too late to stop, Mora added grimly. We have a narrow window of opportunity that they never had. If we act quickly enough, and with sufficient coordination. He left the thought unfinished, but Alara understood. The galaxy's greatest powers had never faced an external existential threat in recorded history. The peace maintained by the Council had been between known entities, species with comprehensible motivations and recognizable patterns of behavior. The Harvesters were something else entirely, a force that operated on principles so alien that communication itself became a liability. "Why did you ask for me specifically?" Alara asked as they reached the briefing room. "There are higher-ranking human representatives on Avoris Prime." Mora's expression softened slightly. "Because you listen, Dr. Sun. You've spent years studying the patterns of civilizations across time. We don't need politicians or military strategists right now. We need someone who can recognize the echoes of history before they become our epitaph." Before Alara could respond, her communication implant chimed with an urgent alert. The Council probe had launched, modified according to Mora's specifications, to use only passive detection systems. In 6 hours, it would reach the coordinates of the sensor network and begin transmitting data back through a secure quantum channel. The waiting began, the hardest part of any crisis. Alara returned to the archives, searching feverishly for any additional references to the Harvesters in historical records from other ancient civilizations. Mora joined the technical teams, refining the detection algorithms to ensure the probe would gather maximum intelligence without revealing its presence. When the first data packets arrived, they confirmed humanity's worst fears. The probe's passive sensors detected massive objects moving in precise formation, hundreds of them, each the size of a small moon. Their energy signatures were unlike anything in the Council's extensive catalogs, suggesting technology far beyond current galactic standards. But it was the last transmission from the probe that truly chilled the Council members gathered in the Emergency Command Center. "Anomalous energy spike detected," reported the Telosian technician monitoring the feed. "The probe it appears to be scanning us." "Impossible," Mora breathed. "It's in completely passive mode. It shouldn't be emitting any traceable signals." The display showed a sudden surge of activity around the nearest Harvester vessel. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from its surface, converging on the probe's location. "They've found it," Alara whispered. The probe's final transmission came through the quantum channel, distorted, but clear enough to understand. "They watch our silence." Then nothing. The command center erupted in controlled chaos as delegates demanded explanations. Security officers called for immediate defensive preparations, and scientists attempted to analyze the scant data they'd received before losing the probe. Ambassador Roll approached Alara and Mora, his normally iridescent carapace dulled with stress. "It would seem your warning was justified. Dr. Mora, the Council Chair has called for an emergency vote on unified defense protocols." "How long before they reach Council space?" Alara asked. "At their current velocity, less than 10 days, Mora replied grimly. "But now that they've detected our probe, they may accelerate." "Then we have no time to waste," Alara said, her historian's caution giving way to decisive clarity. "We need to implement a galaxy-wide communication blackout immediately, following the human model, and we need to position our combined fleets along their approach vector." "A blackout of that scale has never been attempted," Roll objected. "Many species rely on constant communication for basic functions. The economic and social disruption would be enormous." "Not as enormous as extinction," Mora countered. Alara accessed her terminal, pulling up the Mars archive translations. The Martian records suggest the Harvesters don't just destroy communicative civilizations. They strip planets of all resources, leaving nothing behind. Their name isn't metaphorical. They literally harvest worlds. The gravity of the situation settled over the three of them, transcending the species' differences that normally define their interactions. "I will support your recommendations to the Council," Roll said finally, his mandibles clicking in solemn determination. "But we will need more than defensive positioning. We need a strategy that can actually defeat these entities, not merely delay them. Alara looked at Mora. The quantum sensor network you established, could it be repurposed? The physicist's eyes widened slightly as he grasped her meaning. From detection to defense? Theoretically, yes. The nodes are already configured to operate in quantum harmony. With sufficient power and the right modifications, we could create a shield network, Alara finished. Not to stop them directly, but to disrupt their coordination. If they operate as a swarm, they must have some form of communication between vessels. Even non-traditional communication forms would generate quantum fluctuations that could be detected and potentially interfered with. Mora agreed, excitement building in his voice. We'd need to significantly expand the network, place nodes strategically along their approach path. And we'd need to do it without being detected, Roll added. A formidable challenge. But not impossible, Alara said firmly. We have something the Mars civilization didn't have when they faced this threat. Advance warning and unified species cooperation. As they spoke, the Council Chamber's notification system activated, summoning all senior representatives. The emergency vote was about to begin. Alara, Mora, and Roll hurried to the chamber, where the mood had transformed from diplomatic formality to grim determination. The chair stood at the central podium, their bioluminescence pulsing with urgency. Representatives of the Galactic Council, they began. We face an unprecedented threat to our collective civilization. The evidence provided by our human colleagues, tragically confirmed by our own probe's destruction, indicates an imminent invasion by entities known as the Harvesters. These beings appear to target communicative species, using our own transmissions to locate and destroy us. The chair's light patterns intensified. We must now vote on two critical measures. First, the implementation of a galaxy-wide communication blackout following the human protocol. Second, the authorization of a unified defensive action using the combined military resources of all Council species. Ambassador Roll activated his speaking signal. Before the vote, Honored Chair, I believe Dr. Sun and Dr. Mora have a strategic proposal that merits consideration. With a gesture of permission from the chair, Alara found herself once again addressing the full council, this time with the fate of countless worlds potentially hanging on her words. Honored representatives, she began. Historical analysis shows that isolated resistance against the Harvesters has always failed. The Mars civilization, despite their advanced technology, was overwhelmed because they acted alone and reactively. We have the opportunity to implement a proactive, coordinated response. She outlined the shield network concept, explaining how the existing human sensor nodes could be adapted and expanded to create a quantum disruption field. Mora provided the technical specifications, while Roll offered strategic considerations for deployment. As they spoke, Alara watched the reactions ripple through the assembly. Doubt gave way to consideration, then to cautious hope as the delegates recognized the potential of the approach. When the vote came, it was nearly unanimous. The galaxy would go silent, its combined fleets would gather in secret, and the shield network would be deployed along the Harvester's approach vector. The next 7 days passed in a blur of activity. Communication systems throughout Council space went offline in carefully orchestrated sequences, creating the illusion of gradual technical failures rather than coordinated action. Military vessels from dozens of species converged on the designated staging areas, using minimal emission propulsion systems and navigating via pre-established coordinates rather than active guidance beacons. Alara found herself working alongside Mora and a multi-species team of engineers to expand and reconfigure the quantum sensor network. Her historical knowledge proved unexpectedly valuable, allowing her to identify patterns in the Harvester behaviors documented in ancient records and adjust the defense strategy accordingly. They're accelerating, Mora reported on the 8th day, reviewing the latest passive sensor data. Estimated arrival in the outer rim systems in 36 hours. Alara studied the tactical display, where the positions of the Allied fleet were represented by subtle markers, deliberately understated to minimize any detectable emissions. Is the shield network ready? 93% deployed, Mora confirmed. The final nodes are being positioned now. Once activated, the network should disrupt their swarm coordination by approximately 60%, based on our simulations, which still leaves them formidably dangerous, noted Ambassador Roll, who had joined the command team as the Zorlak representative. Our success depends on precise timing and absolute discipline. One premature communication, one misaligned attack, and the advantage of surprise is lost. Alara nodded grimly. Every vessel commander has received sealed orders with synchronized activation protocols. When the Harvester Vanguard crosses the threshold of the network, all nodes will activate simultaneously, followed immediately by the coordinated attack. A single, silent strike, Roll mused. How ironic that our greatest hope lies in becoming what we have always feared, a predator lurking in darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. Sometimes, survival requires adaptation, Alara said quietly, even to strategies that contradict our preferred nature. As the hours counted down, tension mounted in the command center. Representatives from all council species had gathered to witness the encounter, their usual diplomatic posturing set aside in the face of shared peril. Harvester Vanguard approaching outer network perimeter, announced the sensor officer, voice barely above a whisper, despite the secure environment. 30 seconds to threshold. Alara found herself holding her breath, her historian's mind already framing this moment for future archives, assuming there would be archives to maintain after today. Threshold crossed, network activating. Across the vast expanse of space, hundreds of quantum nodes simultaneously shifted frequency, creating a web of disruptive energy that enveloped the approaching harvester vessels. On the tactical display, the neat formation of the invaders suddenly wavered, individual ships drifting out of alignment as their coordination was disrupted. Now, Mora breathed. Throughout the hidden fleet, sealed orders activated in perfect synchronization. Weapon systems powered up, targeting algorithms locked onto the suddenly vulnerable harvester vessels, and attack vectors were calculated with cold precision. There were no ultimatums, no demands for surrender, no warning shots fired across metaphorical bows. The combined fleet struck with simultaneous fury, every vessel firing at exactly the same moment in a devastating volley that overwhelmed the harvesters' suddenly compromised defenses. The first wave of attacks succeeded beyond expectations. Dozens of harvester vessels were destroyed or disabled before they could coordinate a response. For a brief, hopeful moment, it seemed the surprise tactic had worked perfectly. Then the situation changed. Energy surge detected in remaining harvester vessels, reported the sensor officer, alarm evident in their tone. They're adapting to the disruption field, establishing new coordination parameters. On the display, the surviving harvesters began to reorganize, forming smaller, independent clusters that could function without central coordination. Their counterattack came swiftly, beams of coherent energy lancing out to target the shield network nodes. They're isolating and destroying the network nodes, Mora said grimly. At this rate, we'll lose the disruption field in minutes. Our fleet on the southern flank is taking heavy damage, added a military coordinator. Harvester units have broken through their perimeter and are heading toward the Rigel system. Alara studied the tactical display, watching as the carefully orchestrated attack began to falter. The Harvester's adaptive response had changed the parameters of the engagement faster than the Allied forces could adjust their strategy. Then, she noticed something peculiar in the pattern of the Harvester counterattack. They're prioritizing targets based on energy emissions, she said suddenly. Look at the attack vectors. They're striking at vessels and nodes that are emitting the strongest signals, even passive ones. Of course, Mora breathed, seeing the pattern as well. They're energy predators at their core. They hunt by detecting and consuming power sources. An idea formed in Alara's mind, risky, counterintuitive, but potentially decisive. We need to reverse the network's function, she said quickly. Instead of disrupting their communications, we should amplify their energy signatures back at them. Create a feedback loop, Mora nodded, understanding immediately. Use their own emissions against them. Can it be done? Roll asked, mandibles clicking rapidly. Theoretically, yes, Mora replied. But we'd need to reconfigure the entire network simultaneously. The coding changes would have to be transmitted to all nodes at once, which would require breaking our communication silence. Alara acknowledged. A significant risk. Less significant than certain defeat, Roll countered. I support this strategy. The council chair, who had been monitoring the battle in silence, activated their communication field. Proceed, Dr. Sun. Authorization granted for network reconfiguration. Mora moved swiftly to the central command console, fingers flying over the interface as he coded the necessary changes. Ready for transmission to all network nodes. This will create a brief but detectable communication signature. Understood. Alara took a deep breath. Transmit. For a single moment, the careful silence maintained across the defensive operation was broken by a burst of encrypted data streaking from the command center to the quantum nodes scattered across the battlefield. The harvesters reacted immediately, multiple vessels turning their attention toward the source of the unexpected signal. Transmission complete, Mora reported. Network reconfiguring. Seconds stretched into an eternity as they waited to see if the gamble would pay off. The harvester vessels continued their advance, energy weapons charging for a concentrated strike against the command center's location. Then, the network activated in its new configuration. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The harvester vessels' energy signatures, their weapons, propulsion systems, and coordination signals were captured by the quantum nodes and reflected back at them, amplified and distorted. The feedback loop created cascading overloads throughout their systems. On the tactical display, harvester after harvester began to falter. Some simply went dark, their power systems overwhelmed by the reflected energy. Others destabilized more catastrophically, internal systems detonating in chains of secondary explosions that tore their massive hulls apart. It's working, breathed Ambassador Roll, compound eyes reflecting the display's shifting patterns. The Allied fleet, recognizing the harvester's sudden vulnerability, pressed the advantage with renewed coordination. Ships that had been on the defensive now launched precise strikes against the disoriented invaders. Within hours, the battle had transformed from a desperate defense to a decisive victory. The harvester swarm, reduced to less than 20% of its original strength, began a disorganized retreat toward intergalactic space. As the immediate crisis subsided, the command center's atmosphere shifted from tense concentration to cautious relief. Species that had maintained careful diplomatic distance for millennia now exchanged congratulations and shared moments of unity forged in common survival. We should pursue and eliminate the remaining harvesters, suggested a Rigelian commander. Ensure they cannot return with reinforcements. No, Alara said firmly, surprising herself with her own certainty. The retreating vessels will carry information about their defeat. Let them return to whatever civilization sent them. Let them report that this galaxy is not the easy target they anticipated. The council chair's bioluminescence pulsed in a pattern indicating agreement. Dr. Sun is correct. We have demonstrated our capacity for unified defense. Now, we must prepare for the possibility of future encounters from a position of strength rather than surprise. In the days that followed, communication systems throughout council space gradually reactivated, though with new protocols designed to minimize detectable emissions toward intergalactic space. Military vessels returned to their home systems, but cooperative defense agreements remained in place, formalized in a new galactic security compact. A month after the battle, Alara stood in a quiet corner of the archives, finalizing a new exhibit. Around her, the Grand Hall had returned to its usual function as a center of diplomatic exchange, though the conversations now carried a different tone, more measured, more purposeful, with less emphasis on volume and more on substance. "The Silence exhibit is ready for viewing, Dr. Sun," announced her assistant, a young Medusan whose translation field had been calibrated to operate at minimal power, a subtle but significant change from pre-harvester protocols. "Thank you," Alara replied, making a final adjustment to the central display. A holographic representation of the Martian warning glyph, the Silent Star, now paired with the schematics of the quantum shield network that had saved the galaxy. "An impressive presentation," came Ambassador Roll's familiar clicking voice from behind her. "Though I note you've given human contributions equal prominence to those of other species." Alara smiled, detecting the subtle humor in the Zorlak's tone. "Historical accuracy demands no less, Ambassador. This was truly a unified achievement." "Indeed." Roll's compound eyes reflected the shifting light of the display. "Your Commander Voss has returned to the council sessions, I observe, though his speeches seem abbreviated compared to his previous style. We've all learned the value of speaking with purpose," Alara acknowledged, "and of strategic silence. A lesson the galaxy will not soon forget." Roll gestured toward the exhibition title, floating above the display. "Silence, Galaxy's greatest signal." "Do you believe they will return?" the ambassador asked after a moment. "The harvesters." "Eventually," Alara said honestly. "Predators rarely abandon a hunting ground permanently after a single defeat. But we'll be better prepared next time. We've established monitoring outposts beyond the galactic rim, improved our defensive capabilities, and most importantly, learned to cooperate across species boundaries." Roll finished. "A historic achievement in itself. One worth documenting," Alara agreed, activating the final element of the exhibit, a time-lapse showing the spread of silent defense strategies throughout the galaxy, followed by the carefully coordinated restoration of essential communications. As council members began to filter into the exhibition space, Alara stepped back, observing the gathering with a historian's eye. Species that once competed for speaking time now listened carefully to each other. Their communication styles adapted to emphasize precision and purpose rather than volume and duration. Dr. Lucian Mora appeared at her side, his formal science directorate uniform replaced by the more subdued attire of the newly established Galactic Defense Research Initiative. "Your exhibit captures it well," he said quietly. "The paradox of our survival. That our greatest strength was revealed only when we abandoned our most defining characteristic." Alara nodded. "The lesson of strategic silence. A lesson humans perhaps needed more than most," Mora acknowledged with a rueful smile. "Though I admit, I miss the days when we could broadcast our music across the stars without concern." "We'll find new ways to express ourselves," Alara assured him. "More deliberate, perhaps, more meaningful for being carefully chosen." From across the room, Commander Voss caught her eye and nodded respectfully, a simple gesture that would have been unthinkable from the verbose diplomat before the crisis. Now, like all humans in council space, he had adapted to the new reality, that in a universe where predators hunted by tracking communication, silence could be as powerful as speech. The council chair approached the center of the exhibition space, their bioluminescence dimmed to a subtle glow that demanded attention without overwhelming the senses. "We gather to commemorate not only our victory against the harvesters," they began, "but the birth of a new understanding between our civilizations. For millennia, we defined ourselves by our voices, by our ability to project our thoughts and desires across the cosmos. Now we have learned that true power lies in knowing when to speak and when to act, when to broadcast our presence and when to move unseen." The chair's light patterns shifted to the formal configuration used for official pronouncements. Let this new policy be recorded in the archives of all council species. Speak with purpose. Remain silent with prudence. May our words, when chosen, carry the weight of their scarcity. Alara watched as the assembled delegates absorbed the chair's statement, each according to their species' manner. There was no applause, no chorus of approval, just a profound moment of shared understanding that needed no verbal affirmation. In that moment, she felt a deep satisfaction, not just as a historian documenting a pivotal event, but as a member of a galactic community that had evolved beyond its limitations. Humans had entered the Council as the galaxy's most persistent talkers. Now they were respected for their strategic silence. As the exhibition officially opened and delegates began to examine the displays, Alara returned to her archive terminal, beginning the process of cataloging the day's events for future historians. The galaxy had changed fundamentally, and those changes needed to be recorded with precision and insight. In the space where Commander Voss would once have delivered a lengthy speech commemorating the occasion, there was now simply quiet appreciation, a silence that spoke volumes about how far they had come. And in that silence, for the first time in millennia, the galaxy felt truly secure.